and welcome to Chapter Connect. For each week, we will introduce you to a chapter of the Explorers Club. I'm your host, Dr. Tim Radke, Vice President for Chapters at the Explorers Club. Following a presentation by the chapter members, we invite you to join the conversation by submitting your questions online to our Director of Programs, Ann Passer. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing Jeff Blumenfeld, Chairman of the Rocky Mountain Chapter. Jeff, welcome to Chapter Connect.
Yeah, thanks very much. Boy, I haven't been this excited since I went to the World's Fair and saw picture phones, just like this. I was way ahead of the game. But first, I have a little special effects. Okay. Okay, that's enough of that. All right, while that's playing, let me pull together a short presentation to explain who we are in the Rocky Mountain Chapter. Just one second. Let's see if we can do this. Look at that technology. Rocky Mountain Chapter. This is our logo for the chapter. That is the maroon bells. So the chapter, we have a unique experience here in that we are in 6 states, and our chapter is about the size of Greenland. So there's about 1,300 miles from one end to the other part of the chapter. So among our 145 members, what we did was we did a Google search. We entered everyone's address, and we figured out where the greatest concentration is. And no question, the greatest concentration is in the Denver, Boulder area. And that's where we typically have our meetings, although we're successful in doing some field trips, which I'll mention to you shortly. So we use constant contact to notify our members. And one advantage that we have is that we're able to schedule 60 to 90 days in advance. We think that helps so that people can actually plan ahead of time for their meetings. So here's the study that we did, revealing, and no surprise here, that most of our members are in the Boulder, Denver area. So we alternate from having dinners in Boulder to having dinners in Denver, where we meet at the Cheesecake Factory. Cheesecake Factory, of course, now is closed, so we've gone to Zoom during this current virus crisis. We're also set up our own dedicated website, explorers-rm.org, and you'll also find us on Facebook as well. And thanks to Mike Siebert, who you'll hear from shortly, we created a sticker for the chapter. Now that sticker, I think you'll find this amusing, but we put the sticker on the outside of our laptops because when you go through TSA, if you remember what TSA actually was, when you go through TSA, everyone's laptop looks alike, except mine's the only laptop with a sticker from the Rocky Mountain Chapter. So during the last fiscal year, we were able to host 8 dinners in Denver and Boulder. We had 3 special events. We don't charge dues, and our source of guest fees help really allow us to become broke even. We charge $10 for guest fees, and that allowed us to be broke even for the year. One of our speakers was Leonard David, author of Moon Rush. He talked about the importance of our going back to the moon. Here's a short clip from that presentation.
We're the last people to walk on the moon, 1972. I'm old. That's old. Let's get on with it. So we're going back to the moon. How many people here just saw the news? Israel just crashed. They tried to land on the moon. Landing on the moon can be, this is a robotic spacecraft, but it was a great attempt by they would have been the 4th country to land on the moon successfully if they were successful. They weren't. They just announced 2 days ago they're going to build another spacecraft and they're going to try it again. And that's sort of the spirit of Apollo, spirit of the moon, spirit of where we're going.
We're quite fortunate to have here in the Front Range, to have so many excellent speakers to choose from. We also heard from Clay Evans. Clay is an author, lives in the Front Range area. He used forensic science to go back to the island of the Pacific atoll of Tarawa to literally find the bones of his grandfather using forensic science, because back in 1943, they unceremoniously buried quite a number of USGIs, and Clay's fascinating talked about going back. We literally found the bones of his grandfather and repatriated the remains back to the United States. Fascinating talk. Tom Hames, you may all know that the 10th Mountain Division, the 10th Mountain Division Foundation is based here in Colorado. These were the elite mountain troops of World War II. And we were privileged to have Tom Hames from that foundation talk about the history of the 10th. Megan Heaney Greer is an ocean educator and free diver. She spoke to us as well. And our very own Alfred S. McLaren spoke based on his book, Unknown Waters. He spoke about his time exploring the North Pole during the Cold War. And here's a clip from that talk.
Some sections here that you're probably looking at ice that's probably 2 or 3 meters thick. Here's 2 meters over about 2 meters. This is very heavy ice that must have come from somewhere off the Canadian coast, because that was almost about 7 meters thick there. And there's my chief diver and navigator, Toby Borson. He sort of looked like a walrus, and he was all dressed in his gear. And then here we are. This is just hours before we're to start the survey of the Siberian Shelf. So at this time, we're taking all the lines out of the lockers and taking them below, tack welding anything that might come loose. And we want to make absolutely sure that nothing breaks loose and everything's as smooth as possible. There makes minimum flow noise. Again, as we start going towards the Soviet coast, we don't know who's out there. It might be Soviet submarines, and we sort of become ready. Of course, we've blacked out everything now, so we can't be identified. And we're now going to remain under for as long as it takes to survey the Siberian Shelf.
Captain McLaren lives high above Boulder at about 8,000 feet in a home that's like a museum of exploration. It's always fun to visit him. Greg Trinish was a speaker. We held that meeting at Fjallraven. Fjallraven, of course, is a great sponsor of the Explorers Club. They had a store in Boulder. They still have a store in Boulder. In fact, they're opening a store in Denver where we'll do some events. Greg has a program called Adventure Scientists. We were happy to have him speak to the group. Peter Van Arsdale from the University of Denver talked about the history of exploration as well. We took a behind-the-scenes tour of the pachyderm area of the Denver Zoo, thanks to Dave Johnson. Dave is the zookeeper on the far right. That's Art Augie, who, yes, seriously does wear a kilt day to day. He says it's quite cool for him to be in that. And we also went to the National Science Foundation Ice Core facility, where they store 22,000 meters of ice cores. And yes, if you go to the ice core facility and you're not cold, you're kind of getting ripped off. And we were there at minus 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So that was quite an experience to visit that at the Federal Center in Denver. We did a field trip to the Shavano Valley Petroglyph Park. Thanks to Jim Pisarowicz. Jim is on the far left. There's our group as we visited the Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park, and we had a naturalist, she's the one in the Smokey Bear hat, give a talk about the history of that area. It was a great field trip we did last October. And of course, we are now a bunch of explorers who can't really travel anywhere. We're landlocked explorers. We're hunkered in our bunkers. So we have resorted to Zoom. It's not as good as in person, but it's the best we have right now. So we did our first Zoom presentation with Dave Johnson. I thought it went very well when we did that. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you 6 presenters who I've asked to speak during our talk today. First up is George Bash. George is founder and chief cook of the Himalayan Stove Project. I've known George for many years and impressed by his drive and determination to make a difference in Nepal. You know, many of you have traveled to Nepal as I have and other third world countries, and you've seen the problem of household air pollution. Well, George won an Explorers Club Citation of Merit in 2017 for his work studying the issue and providing a solution to the problem, a fuel-efficient cook stove, which has positively influenced the lives of over 50,000 Nepalis since he started the program. It gives me great pleasure to introduce George. George, take it away.
Thanks, Jeff. That was a great introduction, and you took away everything that I was going to say. That's all right. You mentioned earlier how large our area is. I live in Taos, New Mexico, which is just across the Colorado line, and it takes me 5 hours to drive up to Jeff's house from my house. And to scale that for you, if you drive for a little over 4 hours, you could go from Washington to New York City. Anyhow, going back to the Himalayan Stove Project, we started it in 2010, which was also the year that I was nominated by Chris Huntington and joined the Explorers Club. And we have a brief video, Kevin, if you can roll that talks about it much more effectively and visually than I can.
Many families in Nepal suffer from respiratory illness as a direct result of using open-fire, primitive cook stoves.
They have a lungs problem, the breathing problem, lot of smoke in their house.
These illnesses lead to numerous premature deaths each year. They breathe in smoke and soot day and night with zero ventilation. It is their only source of heat and means of cooking.
Smoke destroyed the lungs of people living here. We did not know a solution.
Himalayan Stove Project found the answer: clean cook stoves. These clean cook stoves require 75% less fuel, burn efficiently, and are vented, reducing smoke and harmful gases by 90%.
We had to go very far to collect firewood. Now we get rid of smoke and use much less firewood. We are very happy for getting these stoves.
I'm very appreciative of Himalayan stove coming from very far, supporting my village, poor people. They are very, very happy.
Solely by donations, Himalayan Stove Project and partners trek these stoves through arduous mountain trails into poor, remote regions of Nepal. They deliver and install these life-saving stoves into village homes.
We are excited that cooking food, this will save our lives.
Over 1 million families in Nepal need these stoves. Himalayan Stove Project and partners have already delivered 6,000. So 994,000 to go. And you can be part of this solution. Help transform the life and health of a family in Nepal just by your donation.
Himalayan stove, we really thank you for this, all of that. Thank you.
It always brings tears to my eyes when I see it. It just, shows what we have accomplished in a decade now with delivering, as they say, just over 6,000 stoves. We have 600 stoves on the ground in Nepal. Nepal is on a lockdown right now because of coronavirus. And when that finally shakes loose, the total number will be just over 6,500. We did some earthquake relief work in 2015 and 16. And when you add all of that together, as Jeff indicated, we have impacted the lives of over 50,000 people. And to scale that for you, the Houston Astros Stadium holds 41,000 people. So, you know, we packed that stadium with people that we should, and still have another 9,000 on top of it. Right now, we're suffering with from coronavirus as an institution. We're scaling back our operations in the U.S. to conserve cash. Hopefully, we can resume purchasing and distributing stoves in the foreseeable future, and nobody knows what that is. We're also looking at potentially repurposing a portion of our operation to raise money for other organizations in Nepal that are helping folks on the ground there that are really, really short of cash. The village where most of that video was taken, there's an orphanage there run by a U.S. group, and they don't even have enough food to feed their 54 kids. It's really dire over there. I'll be happy to answer questions in the Q&A, and Jeff, let's roll on to the next presenter, please.
Yes, thanks very much, George. It was always fun to visit George in Taos. Paul died. Paul, you're up. I first met Paul during our chapter field trip to the Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park. Now, you remember the Apollo 13 movie, and you remember the character that Ed Harris played, the guy in the crew cut, the homemade 5-button off-white vest that was portrayed. That was Gene Kranz. Gene Kranz hired our next presenter. For 33 years, Paul has worked in increasingly responsible roles within the U.S. NASA manned space program, both as a technical expert in spacecraft systems and eventually as the overall lead of many missions to space. He retired from NASA in 2013 as the longest serving flight director in U.S. history. He's also author of Shuttle Houston, My Life in the Center Seat of Mission Control, which is coming out in July from Hachette Books. Paul, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let me see if I can share my screen. We'll show this real quickly here. Looks like that, and share. So you should see it. Just be very briefly here. I'll take an hour-long talk and push it down into about 3-4 minutes. It's been 7 years since I retired from NASA, and it's been over 9 years since we last flew the space shuttle. But you know, the space shuttle is still the record holder for the fastest and highest flying winged vehicle ever. It's still worth talking about and sharing the story, and that's really what my book is about. I am an explorer. I'm a pilot, been flying my whole life. I'm an airplane builder and mechanic. I spend a lot of time doing home-built aircraft, experimental aircraft flying these days. And of course, I spent 34 years as a flight director. Let's see if I can make this change. I guess I got to do that. There we go. But it's not about me. It's all about the teamwork. And this is just an example of a flight control team. When you see a picture of mission control, you see about a dozen people in a big room. What you don't see is the many people that support those people in their back rooms, the systems experts. Each one of those front room people has 2 to a dozen people in their back rooms. You don't see the ground controllers, the people who run the building, who run the ground sites around the world. You don't see the engineering support people, the vast engineering group that supports all of those flight operators. And I like to tell the quick story that at the end of a mission, we get a box of patches from the crew office. It's a gift to the people who make the mission happen from the crew themselves. And then the flight directors pass those out. And nobody on my team got a patch until Olga got her patch. Olga was our janitor. Olga made our room livable. And that's how important every single person in the team was. I was selected as a flight director. I started with NASA on the first shuttle flight, STS-1 back in 1980. I was selected as flight director in 1993 when we started flying with the Russians to the Mir space station. We spent a number of years doing that and flew 10 missions to the Mir. 9 of those we docked, we exchanged crews, we put people on board for long periods of time. We basically learned to fly with the Russians so that when we could have when we could build the ISS, we'd have that background. We did other science missions. One I'm very proud of and that's very, very important to the Explorers Club is the STS-99. We flew it around 2001. It was the Space Radar Topography Mapper. We used a radar, a binocular radar, to map topographically the entire planet, every bit of dirt from 60 degrees south to 60 degrees north, sorry, Antarctica. We did that on a grid of 9 meters and with an accuracy of 1 meter. So all of the topographical maps you'll use for the next 100 years came from that mission. And then, of course, the last 10 years or so of the space shuttle program, we were building the ISS, about 34 missions to build it. It weighs 1 million pounds. It goes around the Earth every about 18 times a day, about every 90 minutes. And it's the size of a football field. It has international crews from the US, from Europe, from Japan, from Russia, all working together to do science and take us back to doing engineering research that'll take us back to the moon and onto Mars. As Jeff mentioned, I've got a book coming out where I talk about a lot of the stories from mission control during the shuttle years. What was it like to fly the shuttle? How did we fly it? Some of the inside looks, not only at the systems and the challenges and technology of it, but the human aspects, the stories of what it's like to be in the control center during missions and training. And that will be available in July, so you can pre-order it now if you're interested. And with that, you can take back the screen.
Thanks so much. Here we're back. Okay. Paul, thanks so much. You know, I have a 3-year-old grandson who saw a cartoon about the space shuttle. He is crazed about it now, and I am over the moon that he's so excited about the space shuttle as opposed to Marvel Comics or Spider-Man. But the fact that he loves the space shuttle, I'm thrilled about. Our next speaker is a scientist, an educator, a mountaineer, an explorer, Uliana Horodiskic, PhD. She is just extraordinary is the only way to describe her young career. Uliana was one of 120 semifinalists for NASA's 2017 astronaut class. She was locked in a capsule for 30 days with 3 others in a NASA analog mission to an asteroid. She started a nonprofit adventure citizen science initiative called Science in the Wild. And she just returned earlier this year from learning how to be a Zodiac driver in Antarctica. I am proud to call Uliana my friend.
Thanks so much for that intro, Jeff. And I'm going to try to do the share screen as well here. Okay. So I wanted to take a chance to talk about a recent expedition that I was a part of just this past January before the pandemic took over the world. And also hello to everyone out there watching and listening. So this picture is from a remote part of South America. It's on the border of Chile and Argentina. And to get to the site here, we have to take horses. And the site I'm talking about is the plane crash made famous in the book and movie Alive. If you're not familiar with the story, just in a nutshell, on Friday, October 13th of 1972, Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 crashed high in the Andes. It was carrying 45 passengers and crew. It was a rugby team from Uruguay had chartered a flight from Uruguay to Chile for a friendly rugby match. And they invited a lot of their family and friends to join. And unfortunately, they crashed. And after the initial crash, there were 29 survivors. And 72 days later, when they're finally rescued, there are only 16. And how they got rescued is also an incredible story. 2 of the survivors in early December had to walk across the Andes. Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa, they made this arduous climb and trek, and they came across this Chilean peasant who finally helped them, and then helicopters rescued the survivors, the remaining 14 that were still high up on this glacier. Wanted to share this historic photo with you. So fast forward to 2005. So Ricardo Peña, who has become my husband since last year, he's a mountain guide, and he went climbing high up in the Andes to look at where the plane actually impacted, to kind of learn more about this story. And is there any other artifacts up there that are being melted out? And in fact, amongst this pile of rocks, you can see here was this coat, blue coat sticking out. And inside the coat was a wallet and passport. And it turned out it was one of the survivors, one of the 16. And here's a photo of Eduardo being reunited with that coat more than 30 years later. And he was impressed that it still fit. So pretty cool, just amazing story there. You can see how beat up it is. And here's one of his sons with him. So it's this incredible tale of survival and resilience. And so since then, Ricardo and Eduardo paired up to guide people to the plane site crash, to share this story, this important story of survival. And so here's a photo this past January. So I've been fortunate enough to go since 2018. My background is a geologist and glaciologist, and you have all of that here. You have a lot of these beautiful volcanic rocks. And then behind us here is actually the glacier. It's debris covered. So it doesn't even look like the glacier looked back in 1972. And so had the plane crash, for example, now, there's no way there probably would have been survivors, because there's rubble all across the surface here. So this year, we went out to the surface of the glacier to see, well, what's melting out? I mean, this story is almost 50 years old at this point, but there's still secrets that the glacier is unveiling. So I point out this bottle here. So we actually found this liquor bottle. It was a Bols Gold liquor. I believe that comes, it's Dutch. And what they had to survive on up there was whatever rations they had of cheeses and chocolates and alcohol. And then eventually, if you know the story, the bodies of the dead. But this liquor bottle was significant because it was one of the bottles that was used to collect snow that had melted for drinking water. And every survivor drank from this bottle nearly 50 years ago, and the glacier finally released it in pieces. So Eduardo got reunited with another piece of history. So in thinking about the Explorers Club and the kinds of things we do with exploration and adventure and science, it's just amazing that we can still find these kinds of things and this sense of exploration in places where you might be going for 5, 10, 15 years and finding new things is pretty incredible. And Eduardo actually, in fact, asked about this specific bottle because it was so significant to him. So it was a very touching moment to see that. And as the glacier is melting and revealing more and more of these artifacts every year, we're going back to document. This is some of the landing gear here. And again, this is on the surface of the glacier. So it's one of these glaciers that's just covered in rubble at this point, because there's just been so much extensive melting. But crevasses are actually opening up lower down, swallowing some of these artifacts and maybe be lost forever. So the next trip there is in January 2021. At this point, of course, it's dependent on conditions with the pandemic, and you can take a look on these web pages here for more information if you wanted to come and join. And Eduardo has become a close friend over the years. In fact, he even married Ricardo and I last year, and I believe that his story and the story of all the survivors is one that's really, really important to keep and to share with the younger generation, especially myself. You know, I remember reading this story when I was young, but there are many in my college classes that I teach that have no idea about this story. I think it's important to keep that story alive. And at a time when our world is ravaged by this pandemic, realizing that resilience is so important, because these men survived for 72 days in such extreme conditions that they demonstrated, you know, what teamwork and resilience and what that can do. And I think that's key to our survival as a species as well. Thank you. I'll stop my share screen here.
And we'll have time for questions afterwards. Uliana, thanks so much. Thanks so much for that. Well, our next presenter, I call him a hyphenated explorer. He's an independent environmental scientist. He's a consultant, naturalist, photographer, climber, and adventure enthusiast. Preston's work in the Sabina Cocha watershed in Chile has led to the discovery of new animal and plant species and the world's highest frog and freshwater clam populations. He's the subject of a new documentary called Lost Temple of the Inca, which aired on National Geographic. He's also a mean fly fishing angler as well. We fish together. I call him the fish whisperer. Preston, there you go. Take it away.
Thanks for that, Jeff. I seem to recall you beat me the last time we went fishing,
Well, just once.
but I'll take it. Hello, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as well. Thanks for the introduction. I'm going to also bring it back to Earth because I'm still not bored with Earth, and South America as well. The site I've been working on for a number of years is located in the heart of the Cordillera Vilcanota mountain range. That's in southeastern Peru, and specifically in a watershed called the Lake Sabina-Cocha watershed. You see the red circle there, and Lake Sabina-Cocha lies in the middle of that. Out of that flows the Salca River, and further downstream that turns into Vilcanota, and eventually the Urubamba that flows past Machu Picchu. Might get you all oriented. It's a beautiful environment. Lake's huge. It's about 18 kilometers long, about 100 meters deep, and the surface of it lies right about 5,000 meters, so right about 16,000 feet elevation. The lake and the glaciers around it represent the most critical water source for southern Peru. Despite that elevation, there's really a remarkable ecosystem that survives there. And recently we added that, we put out an array of camera traps in 2017, and since then have captured 8 photographs of the Andean mountain cat in that watershed as well. This is the most endangered cat in all the Americas. I think top 5 most endangered cat in all the world. But my current project is more around archaeology. So I was there in 2005 collecting samples. I saw a new frog species, what I thought might be a new aquatic frog species in the lake. Got the bright idea to take a wetsuit up there, swim around in the lake to look for this frog.
Mike, let me introduce you. We're not seeing your slides.
No, you're not.
No.
Okay. My screen is shared. What do we got to do to share the screen?
You got to select it on the. You've got to select. You get
Yeah.
a menu
Okay.
there,
There we go.
and then you got to run it. Then you got to hit run. There you go.
Shall we back up?
Yeah, just go through that quick again.
Okay. Well, hopefully everyone heard all of that. So here's the first slide, get us oriented geographically. You see the red circle on the right, there's Laguna Sabina-Cocha, the river flowing out of that, and Machu Picchu up on the top left-hand corner of the slide. Here's a view of Sabina-Cocha. You can see the glaciers behind it, surrounded by 6,000 meter peaks. A view of the Andean mountain cat, some of the photographs that we've collected there. This is me in the lake right after I looked down and discovered ruins under the lake, and I think that brings us up to speed. What I found there about 4 meters below the surface was about a 100-meter long zigzag structure made of yellow colored stones. It appeared to represent a snake and perhaps ceremonial or sacred architecture. Around that structure, I found a series of pots laying on the bed of the lake as well. This was all very interesting because there are local legends of a village being under the lake, but geographically this also fits in with the potential location of one of the lost Incan temples called the Temple of Gaudi. With that, I mounted 2 expeditions to conduct archaeological surveys there with funding from National Geographic. And we found cultural material everywhere we looked. Lithics, we found lots of ceramics around the lake, dating from pre-Incan, Incan, and colonial periods. Some of those ceramics appear to be offering vessels that had been thrown into the lake. So that added some indication that this might be a ceremonial location. 2017, we conducted an underwater excavation and collected one of those pots. That appeared to be an offering, potted offerings inside of it, dated from the late intermediate period, so 1000 to about 1400 AD. And the culmination of that project from 2015 to last year was a documentary called Lost Temple of the Inca that's playing worldwide on National Geographic, and I had the honor of premiering that at the Explorers Club headquarters in February. Next step for this site, we're putting together another archaeological team to go investigate what appear to be tombs that I found in the mountains around that. We need to excavate more of the structures there, get a better idea of what people were doing up there, the context of the site. And we've got about 22 miles of shoreline to survey still, and a few more of those pots that we would like to recover. Sorry about the glitch there, guys, but thank you.
Preston, thanks very much. Can people download or buy that video? How would they do that?
That it's still playing on National Geographic Channel. Eventually, it's going to go to Disney Plus, I'm told. But if somebody wants to see it before then, give me a shout. And if anyone would like to pitch in, please give me a call. We need some help up there.
At the Boulder International Film Festival, I saw Preston, I saw 200 people just about give him a standing ovation after they viewed the film, and Preston was featured in a talkback at the end of that. It was quite impressive. Susan is another past, Susan Purvis is another past chapter speaker. She's an explorer, a rescuer, an author, and an educator. Her rescue work with her dog Tasha was actually recognized in the Congressional Record. She's an expert on wilderness medicine. She spoke to the chapter about, well, how not to kill yourself when adventuring in remote places. She's author of Go Find, My Journey to Find the Lost and Myself. It's out from Blackstone Publishing. Susan, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks you guys. What do I talk about? My first disclosure is I'm not a doctor. I don't have a medical degree and I don't have a PhD. I'm really a storyteller, explorer, an educator, and a connector. And there's all these great connections going on between the Khumbu Cough and planes and pilots and books and South America, which I'll get to here in a minute. My specialty is I'm a wilderness and rescue medicine specialist. I travel around the world, either educating or being hired as a consultant for expeditions or television. And I also teach avalanche courses. My company's called Crested Butte Outdoors because that's where I got a lot of my experience from. I'm involved with the Explorers Club because I met Richard Wiese, the president of the Explorers Club, at the hottest place on earth. We were both the two Americans on a science documentary looking at how the Afar warriors and the animals that they care for survive in the hottest place on earth. I live in Northwest Montana near Glacier National Park, and I moved here from Colorado because of the wide open spaces and grizzly bears. But talk about connection and bringing it back home. Kelly Stoner, the bison specialist, was on this week with the Explorers Club, and she talked about what's happening with the bison and her relationship with the Blackfeet Indians. Because of my association with medicine, I spend time on the Blackfeet Reservation. That is my teepee, and I'm a part of their Sundance ceremony every year. The other connection with Kelly is that she is working with the Ted Turner Foundation to access the bison. And I also teach wilderness medicine to the bison wranglers for Ted Turner. This is his New Mexico property, and they have a unique situation there. They have a migration of bats. There's like over 1 million bats that come to their ranch for migration or breeding. And so there's a picture of that. My background is I'm a gold exploration geologist, mostly working in the Dominican Republic and Mexico. So I have a science background, but I really got involved in medicine 25 years ago, and ski patrol medicine and search and rescue. And I was fascinated by it. And I went on to train a search and rescue dog that Jeff talked about in these disciplines. So I spent a career looking for people lost or killed in the backcountry. Bringing it around, I've had because of my relationship with medicine and what I do, even though I'm not a doctor, I've got a chance to go on all these trips around the world. I've spent time in Antarctica, kind of in all 3 ports. This was my trip on the SS Gould from Punta Arenas to the Palmer Station. Most recently, I was involved in the recovery of Lydia. Now, Lydia was not a human. It's this down DC-3 plane where we flew from Cape Town, South Africa to the Novo base and then on to the Holtana Glacier, where I was part of a team with 13 mechanics and a couple Americans, and their job was to repair and fly this plane, this DC-3 plane, back to Calgary. Now that's a whole nother story. If you guys, Explorer Club wants to hear a story about this, we made a film, we've got footage, and it's quite a story. One of the things I've been able to do is to give back. And I started a high altitude medical school for the less fortunate, which really are the Kilimanjaro guides. Mount Kilimanjaro is one of the most dangerous mountains for Westerners to climb. There's a lot of death. So I went there with my all my expertise, and some simple things as washing your hands so that crews and clients stay safe is a big deal too. This is the Mount Kilimanjaro helicopter in the upper left here. So, how do you improvise when you're on expeditions? You guys, sounds like, we all travel, and, risk management and packing a first aid kit is a big part of what you guys do. Once you do have the commercial stuff, do you bring it? What's important? How practical is it to use it, 18,000 feet in a blizzard? From Africa, I was asked to move on to Nepal, and I started a program there. I've taught 7 programs there for the Sherpa guides. Again, who, English is maybe their 3rd language. They don't know how to tell time, but just basic medicine and how their body works and how to manage high altitude problems. These guys are quite good at what they do. A lot of these guys, I've trained over 100 students, have gone on to start the first Mount Everest search and rescue team. I feel very proud of, and I've collaborated with the Khumbu Climbing School and Dr. Luann Freer. So this is Appa Sherpa. He was one of my first students. So here we are in the time of COVID. I've been practicing safety for a long time. This is me on a flight, 20 years ago. This is how I fly. This might be our new world with wearing dishwashing gloves, but I'm about to teach one of the first wilderness first responder courses during this COVID time. So if anybody has any questions about what that looks like and how we're going to do it, you can put it in the chat room. But maybe really this is our new post-COVID life. That's me in the hottest place on earth. One last quick thing before we finish up here. 31 years ago, I flew down to this remote corner of the Amazon basin with a freelance writer who's also a pilot to report on the burning of the Amazon. I have 17 hours of footage. I did a 25-minute documentary, and we were there to report on how the burning of the Amazon is affecting the Connemara Indians and the rubber tappers. So now that the Explorer Club has a great grant program, I want to apply for a grant to go back maybe 32 years later to see how the burning of the rainforest has affected these communities. The article did get published in the Smithsonian magazine. So if anybody wants to help me with that project, put your name in the chat box. I'd love to talk to you about it. And then this is the Triple Divide. If you think you know where the Triple Divide is in Montana, put it in the chat box. Let's see how smart you guys are. And thanks, you guys. Here's my memoir that came out about 1.5 years ago. So thank you. Back to you, Jeff.
Susan, thanks so much for that presentation. Our final speaker. Now, when I met Michael Siebert, Mike said that he drove the rover, the Mars rover, and I'm thinking about some giant steering wheel on some video game that he just sits there and, no, not exactly. He spent 12 years working on the operations team for the twin Mars rovers, Spirit and Opportunity. During that time, he held many roles: ground system engineering, tactical uplink lead, mission manager, testbed lead engineer, and lead flight director for the program. He currently is a systems engineer for Maxar Technologies, where he's co-investigator for the sampler robot arm It's a science payload device selected for launch to the moon on the commercial lunar landing. I am proud to have Mike participate as our final speaker. Michael?
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I'm Mike Siebert. So I was fortunate enough to end up working on the Twin Rovers Spirit and Opportunity as my first job right out of college. So my background's in aerospace engineering, and with a bachelor's degree, I managed to get a job at JPL and join that team. And that was in 2005. These rovers launched in the summer of 2003, with Spirit first launching on June 10th and Opportunity following a month later, and landed both in January 2004. So I'd never seen either of these rovers with my own eyes, but they went on to become a very important part of my life. See if I can quickly share a few photos from that part. So kind of just put together a few photos. The top center one's the rover family portrait. Two of those rovers are testbed rovers. So those are the Earth-based stunt doubles, effectively, where we get to try out all of our ideas on how to drive, how to improve operations. The one that is the medium size is the Spirit and Opportunity rover. So that's the stunt double Dusty. Below it at the bottom is the flight spare for the Pathfinder rover that would land on Mars in 1997. So that was the Sojourner rover that went on the Pathfinder mission. That rover is actually a real Mars rover. So that's the Marie Curie, but since it didn't go to Mars, it is in the Smithsonian. And so is the testbed rover for Spirit and Opportunity. The big one is the Mars Science Laboratory, so Curiosity, and it's the same design as the new Perseverance rover launching this summer. So that gives you an idea of roughly how big all these rovers are. We've scaled them up quite a bit over the few decades of the modern Mars program. So as Jeff mentioned, drive a Mars rover, no steering wheel, no joystick. It's just a keyboard, mouse, and a monitor. So it's not much different than how we're dealing with video conferences now, except for instead of instantaneously being able to talk to the rover, we put together a bunch of commands, send it up to the rover, and then wait several hours for the signal to come back through one of the satellites around Mars. Kind of a highlight reel of some photos. The one on the top left that shows a nice little dust devil up here in the corner. This was just some standard imaging we do, look back at our tracks, see where we've gone, just to document it. And there happened to be a dust devil. This image came down on April 1st. So I thought it was an April Fool's joke when I first saw it. Somebody that had followed the mission sent me the picture and said, good April Fool's joke. And I thought, being somebody that has photoshopped things into our images before, that he was pulling a fast one on me. Turns out it was a real image, and it's just one of the best of the mission that you couldn't have planned if you tried. At the bottom is a panorama looking through Marathon Valley. That's on the eastern rim of the 20-kilometer Endeavour crater, named after the ship of exploration Endeavour. The valley is named Marathon Valley because when we reached it, the Opportunity rover had passed a marathon worth of driving. Now, this is a rover that was designed to drive 1 kilometer total. When its mission ended in June 2018, it had gone 45 kilometers. We learned a lot about Mars. We learned a lot about the hardware. And for a mission that was supposed to last 3 months, it ended up lasting over 15 years. And the final image I just want to quickly mention is the one in the top right. That's looking at some of the robotic tools we have. The American flag is on the rock abrasion tool. That tool was built in New York City by Honeybee Robotics. The American flag is placed on a piece of aluminum that was recovered from the World Trade Center. And we tend to take pictures of that for special occasions. The first time we did it was shortly after landing. Second time was on the 10th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. And the image here was taken when Opportunity reached the summit of Cape Tribulation, just to the north of Marathon Valley, which is the highest point on the eastern rim of Endeavour Crater. And I was fortunate enough to be the rover driver on shift that put together the commands to move that robotic arm into the field of view of our cameras. So that's could be the closest I come to raising a flag on a summit on another world, but it was a pretty spectacular thing. Jeff mentioned that I am also a co-investigator on a new mission that's going to the moon. So Sampler is a robotic arm we're developing at Maxar to actually study the lunar regolith. We are leading it as a technology demonstration, and it's carrying a penetrometer system from the Colorado School of Mines to potentially look for water ice bound up in the lunar regolith. We don't think we're going to see anything with where we're landing, but for future missions, it could use that technology. We have a scoop with a sieve on it to dig into the regolith and look at the particle sizes. And we're also carrying 2 cameras from another payload that was co-manifested with us that are going to be used for panoramic imaging, potentially taking a selfie of the lander that's hosting us, and also close-up images of the lunar regolith. And that was one of our selling points for this, was we had spare space on a robotic arm. So if anybody who we were flying with could enable more science, we would be happy to put them on our arm. So the Heimdall team took us up on the offer, and it's going to really enhance their science mission and our science capabilities. So recently we found out that NASA had selected the lander we would be flying on. The landers that are going to the moon are being built by commercial companies, being operated by commercial companies. So NASA is paying them to provide landing and data and communications as a service. So Mastin Space Systems with their XL1 lander has been selected. They told us we're going to be launching in late 2022, landing a few days after launching out of Florida. And this will be the first mission to the South Pole of the moon. So we will get there. We will be the first to actually explore that region. And that is where NASA is currently planning on sending human crews with the Artemis program. So we will be doing some initial early reconnaissance. There's a good chance that the human crews won't land anywhere near us, but we'll be the first to take a look and be able to provide data to compare it to what we saw during Apollo and what was seen with the Russian and Chinese robotic systems. So it's heck of an opportunity to go explore some terrain that's only been seen from lunar orbit. So thanks for giving me a couple minutes to talk about what I'm working on.
Thanks, Michael. I had a question for you. So these rovers are like the Santa Maria of exploration. Has there been any thought given to preserving them for future generations that will then go to the moon?
So for the rovers on Mars, they were designed to be left there and not come back. Nice part is because of the environments on Mars and on the surface of the moon, they're slightly different. The main bulk of the hardware should last a very long period of time. In fact, the Mars rovers will probably outlast almost anything we built here on Earth. There are some discussions starting to talk about preserving lunar heritage sites. Mainly the Apollo sites and some of the other early landers. So there is already work, because when you land on the moon, if you land too close to another object, and we saw this with Apollo 12 and Surveyor 3, the lunar dust that is kicked up on landing will effectively sandblast anything nearby. The vehicle landing is fine, but anything nearby takes some pretty good damage. So there's discussions of how you even land near any other object on the moon to ensure its safety and what will need to be done. My academic career, I'm now working on a PhD in space resources in parallel with my professional pursuits. There's been discussion of how do you build landing pads so that there's less disturbance of areas. But there's been a lot of active discussion of how do we preserve our history of exploration on the moon.
Fascinating, and thanks so much for participating here and for the dinner you hosted as well. So I am thrilled that our speakers took the time to talk about some of the things we're doing at the Rocky Mountain chapter. At this point, if we have any questions, I'll throw it over to Ian and Tim.
Great presentation by everyone. Really, really polished and quite impressed. Thank you for joining us. Jeff, I was looking over your bio and I wanted to ask you a few things. Now, I saw you're a former director of communications for the club, and you also currently serve on the Flag and Honors Committee, which is a very prestigious organization within the club. There are a couple of things in your bio that caught my attention. I wish you would talk about a little bit more. I think people might be interested in the Students on Ice program that you participated in and the Gift of Sight program expedition.
Well, I'm a strong believer in volunteerism. I've written a book about volunteerism called Travel with Purpose. And the basic premise is wherever you go in the world, you should lend a hand when you get there. And it's not a heavy lift. You can go for a month. You could go for 2 weeks. You can lend a hand in an afternoon. Volunteerism also includes just bringing medical supplies and dropping them off when you get there. So I was able to visit Antarctica as a volunteer on Students on Ice. You can see that online. If you Google Students on Ice, I was privileged to be a chaperone on a student's trip. And then I was also privileged to be director of communications on 2 eye care missions to Nepal, where thousands of people are blind in Nepal for no other reason than they have cataracts in their eyes. And we were able to perform dozens of surgeries to give them the gift, what we call the gift of sight. So that's some of my my commitment to volunteerism. It's hard to be promoting a travel book right now, but I'm sure we're all confident that things will open up and slowly improve, so we can get back to doing both exploration and volunteerism around the world. Were there any other questions?
Well, I wanted George to, if George has any information about how any of our viewers could donate to his cause, I think this would be a good time to get that out, George, because you probably are going to have a fairly large audience. We've had up to 1,600 people watch these, so this is a great way to reach out to people.
Thank you very much, Tim. I always enjoy having the opportunity to make a commercial. We do have a website. It's HimalayanStoveProject.org, and there's a great big donate button on it. And you know, we are using those funds obviously to finish the distribution of existing stove inventory. If things turn around, we will use those funds to buy and distribute more stoves. If it takes a while to turn around, we will help fund other organizations. So this is money that's going to be used. We're cutting our overhead so that we're going to be lean and mean. So please go to HimalayanStoveProject.org and help support us.
Great, thanks, George. Anne, I'm going to open it up to you. Do you have any questions for viewers?
Well, first of all, I just want to say hi to everybody out there this evening. And just so that you know, Paul, there's somebody by the name of Kristen Farry saying hello to you. She was one of your former flight controllers.
Oh, hi back. I remember the name.
And also to Susan, Victor Pena is on. He's saying you trained me in the wilderness medicine back in 2003. He's thrilled to see how far you've come and what you've accomplished. So it's really nice to see everybody coming together here. Questions? We don't have that many. Dave Dolan was wanting to hear about your book, Jeff, but I think that's already sort of been covered. I've read your book Get Sponsored about how to get funding for expeditions, which is an excellent guide. By the way, I understand that Jeff has written a new book about volunteering internationally. So if you want to say anything, but you've already, go ahead.
Well, basically, it's a travel with purpose. Buy all you want, we'll print more.
Thomas Hart is asking, what's the future of adventure travel and volunteer travel after the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, once we get this vaccine, I expect that things will open up again. It's all dependent on this vaccine, but I'm encouraged. It's not going to be like this all the time. That's what I tell my students at the University of Colorado. It's not always going to be this way. It'll be different, but not locked down like we are currently.
We actually have a member by the name of Martin Nuea who recently presented at the Wilson Center. And he's done some research on, I'm sure all of you know Martin, and he's done a lot of research on narwhals. And he recently found out that narwhals are susceptible to COVID-19, as are many other animals. And he's on this Wilson Center program. You'll see how expeditions will have to change in the future because of the different endangered species that are all susceptible to COVID and how careful we're going to have to be going forward. So I hope to have him coming up sometime soon. Let's see. Jenny is writing, we at Princeton University Press are interested in your book projects. Send us your proposals. Okay, that's nice.
That's nice.
Let's see, anybody else out there have any questions? I think you all did such an amazing job on your presentations. You gave out all the information. There's not that much to ask.
Well, I would certainly say that when travel opens up, I invite people to attend our live in-person Rocky Mountain chapter dinners. I also want to share with you what we have coming up on Zoom. Bing, bing, bing. Oh no, wait, is it there? Can you see it? No.
Oh, they can come join us on Zoom, Jeff. They don't have to come and eat at the Cheesecake Factory.
Here we go. Oh, stop share. Anyway, we have a presentation by Mark Armstrong on Zoom on May 14th. And in June, we have a presentation by Polar Explorer John Houston. So anyway.
Mark is Neil's son, right?
Right, Mark Armstrong is Neil's son. And he's going to be speaking on May 14th. So we invite everyone to Zoom in with us. And then when things open up, come visit us in the Front Range.
So Libby's asking about a chapter in Florida, but we'll take that off screen, Libby, and we'll get together with you. But I think you all did an amazing job tonight. Tim, I know you had something to add.
No, but just wanted to ask you what's brewing for Monday?
Mondays, you're gonna have to come back and see. Next week is gonna be all surprises for us, so stay tuned. Both for a possible chapter connect next Thursday and also for Monday night. I think we're gonna have a real surprise for you coming next week.
You'll send out emails on that, Ann?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Great.
Ann and Tim, I speak for all the speakers in thanking you for taking the time to set this up. It's been a lot of fun for us to share our commitment to exploration and share the work that we all do. So thank you.
I would like to say that you're finished, but you're not just finished yet. So give me one more second, but thank you very much, Jeff. And certainly it's a pleasure to have the Rocky Mountain chapter with us. You cover so many states and you have amazing projects that are going on. We're thrilled to have you as a chapter chair. So Mark Ryan Brown, who's watching too, is asking how many of the Chilean survivors are still with us and did they interact together? Liliana.
Yes. Okay. So of the 16 original survivors from Uruguay, 15 are still alive. So one, he was the oldest of the survivors, has since passed away. And actually the Chilean peasant who helped them just passed away this year. It's a big loss. But a really interesting thing that the survivors do is that every December 22nd, which is when they were all rescued, they get together and they call it their second birthday. And it's a celebration of life and all the life that's come about as a result of them being married and having families now. So it really is this amazing brotherhood.
I think with that, I think that's all the questions that we have tonight, but that was a great question, Mark Ryan Brown. So thank you for asking it. And Jeff, I can't thank you enough for pulling this together very quickly. And all of you that presented tonight, thanks so much for coming together and for introducing yourselves to us, and stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you next week.
It's our
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Yes, as Ann said, thank you all very much. And I just want our viewers to know that next week we will be probably shifting gears a little bit. We have some surprise in store and we'll tell you more about it later. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Ann.
Thanks again.
So long, guys.